Jackson, don't forget, you're just a guest. Don't overstep. Those were my mother's words right before her 55th birthday party. 6 months ago, that day, I left work early to help her, running all over the place through the noisy crowd, and even spent $1,500 to help cover some of the party costs. Even though we weren't as close as we used to be, she'd still appreciate my effort. But after everything, she still treated me like a guest passing through her life. So what did I do after that? Stick around and hear my story, and let me know what you think about my choices. Hello, everyone. My name is Jackson. I'm 30 years old and currently a branch manager for a financial company in Denver. My job is pretty stable. The income's good. And life, you could say, is comfortable. I own my own home, have a reliable car, and work a steady Monday through Friday schedule. From the outside looking in, people might call that success. There were times I believed that, too, until one day I asked myself, if I had to choose the most essential thing from everything I've been through, the answer wouldn't be the job and it wouldn't be the money. It would be a promise. Something my father told me before he passed away 18 years ago. I still remember that last afternoon, sitting by his hospital bed. His hand was thin and frail, but he still gripped mine tightly. His voice was raspy, but every word was clear. When you grow up, be a good man, and take care of your mother for me. I was only 12 years old at the time. He was too young to fully understand the weight of what he was asking, but I nodded and carried those words with me as I grew up. From that moment on, I did everything I could to make my mother happy, to give my father peace in heaven. But then, one day, I realized everything I had worked so hard for had been for nothing. Not because I wasn't patient enough, not because I gave up halfway, but because the woman I had promised to protect for the rest of my life was no longer the mother I once knew. I realized that on a night 6 months ago, a night that was supposed to be vital to her. The critical day I just mentioned was my mother's 55th birthday. 3 days before the party, I got a call from her. I picked up right after the third ring. It was during my lunch break at work. Her voice came through the line as soon as I answered. A little rushed, not even waiting for me to say hello. She said, "Jackson, come home this weekend. I'm throwing a party for my 55th birthday." Once I understood why she was calling, I didn't think twice. I said, "Sure, I'll be there." On the other end, she hesitated for a few seconds. Then her voice dropped like she was trying to be careful. "Jackson, could you help cover some party costs if you can? I'm still a little short." As soon as she brought it up, I asked, "How much do you need?" Without missing a beat, as she'd already figured it out beforehand, she answered, "About $1,500. Right after she said that, I agreed, hung up, and transferred $1,500. I didn't want to go back. For over 10 years, I haven't felt like I truly belonged at any party in that house. But I kept trying to make her happy, because I still remembered my father's last words. "Take care of your mother for me." That weekend, I went home, bringing a small, carefully wrapped gift, a quiet birthday wish from my mother. When I arrived, the front yard was already packed with cars. Inside, the house was buzzing with laughter and chatter. I stepped in and saw my mother busy mingling with the relatives. The place was pretty crowded. I guessed around 30 people, most familiar faces from childhood. As I walked up the steps, a few folks I recognized called out greetings. Then a familiar voice came from behind me. "Jackson, long time no see." Man, I turned around and saw Luke, my younger cousin, a 2-year-old junior, someone I had always been fond of. I smiled and shook his hand firmly, feeling the warmth in his grip. After a few quick words, I carried my gift deeper into the house, looking for my mother among the crowd. Just as I got close, I overheard one of my aunts, Aunt Carol, asking about the house. Her voice carried across the room. "You've been renting this place for over 10 years. I bet rent's gotta be at least $2,500 a month by now." After Aunt Carol spoke, I saw my mother give her usual soft smile and say, with a hint of pride in her voice, "The new owner's really kind. They bought the place 2 years ago and even lowered our rent from $1,500 to $1,000 monthly. We're lucky." During that, I just gave a faint smile. No one in that room knew the real house owner they were praising. It was me, and I didn't bother correcting them. When Mom saw me walking, she immediately made her way over, her face lighting up with a rare flicker of joy. She opened her arms and gave me a polite hug, then spoke softly, just loud enough for the people around us to hear. "I'm glad you came home." I gave a slight nod, keeping a polite smile on my face. Right after, I held out the small gift I had prepared and placed it gently into her hands. "I brought you a little something. I hope you like it." Inside the simple wrapping paper was a pastel blue silk scarf, the color I knew she often chose for light, elegant gatherings. It wasn't an expensive gift, but I had picked it carefully, something tasteful and just formal enough for a day like today. Mom accepted the gift, her face showing a flicker of surprise, then smiled and nodded in thanks. I didn't ask if she liked it. I just stood there, quietly watching as she held the gift, before she quickly turned away, greeting and shaking hands, with the crowd gathering around her. From a distance, I spotted Hudson, the man Mom had remarried over 15 years ago. He was leaning against the living room doorway, a glass of wine in his hand, casually chatting with the guests. Right beside him was Olivia, Hudson's daughter, 6 years younger than me. She was wearing an expensive designer dress, scrolling through her phone, her eyes drifting blankly, not bothering to hide her disinterest in everything happening around her. About 20 minutes later, the party officially started, with the candle glowing, the warm wishes, and the familiar tune of Happy Birthday. At first, I thought everything would pass peacefully, but as soon as the party moved into the dining part, I noticed Mom rushing back and forth from the kitchen, her face glistening with sweat. At that moment, it hit me. Mom had underestimated the work. She hadn't hired any extra help for the party. She was handling everything herself alone, trying to manage 30 guests. Without thinking twice, I rolled up my sleeves, left my seat, and headed straight for the kitchen, helping her carry dishes, pour drinks, and clear tables. While weaving through the busy crowd, I realized, aside from me and Mom, no one else had even thought about getting up to help. The relatives and guests seemed to think it was perfectly natural to sit there, eating, drinking, chatting, and eventually leaving. Nothing more. I didn't blame them. I understood no one wants to ruin their good mood at a party by running into the kitchen. But there were the people I couldn't help but notice. Hudson and Olivia. When I glanced their way, I saw Hudson sitting back, leisurely sipping his wine, laughing and chatting loudly. Olivia didn't even bother to lift her head from her phone, completely ignoring the sight of Mom scrambling around, trying to keep everything together. After more than 15 years of being with Mom, after calling themselves family for all that time, at that moment, in the middle of that noisy crowd, they just sat there, enjoying everything, without so much as getting up to pour a glass of water, or help her cut a slice of cake. About 15 minutes later, the party finally began to settle down. Food and drinks were neatly arranged, on the long tables covered in white cloths. Guests started digging in, and the buzz of conversation filled the room. Just as I was about to head back to my seat, Olivia, my stepsister, suddenly grabbed the wireless microphone set aside for the congratulatory speeches. She raised her voice, making sure everyone could hear. "Big thanks to our server, Jackson, for helping make the party run smoothly." Right after her words, laughter erupted across the room. Before the crowd could settle Hudson, my stepfather lifted his wine glass and added his cutting joke. "Bit slow there, Jackson. Maybe you should sign up for a waiter training course." This time, the laughter was even louder. Some guests even clapped, like they were enjoying premium entertainment. I stood there, frozen in the crowd, each burst of laughter slicing silently into my pride like 1,000 tiny knives. Just as the air was growing unbearably heavy, a firm, steady voice cut through the noise. "That's enough. Don't push it too far." I turned around. It was Luke, my cousin, 2 years younger than me. He stood there, face serious, his eyes barely hiding his disappointment. The whole room fell silent at that moment, leaving only the faint background music. playing from somewhere in the distance. Right after Luke spoke up, I took a deep breath, steadying myself. Then, while the silence in the room still hung heavy in the air, I turned toward Hudson, my voice low and firm, each word clear and deliberate. If my father were still alive, he would have rolled up his sleeves and helped Mom out. When the words left my mouth, I saw Hudson's face darken instantly. He slammed his wine glass down onto the table, the sharp sound cutting through the frozen atmosphere of the party. His voice snarled, dripping with anger and humiliation. "You disrespectful punk. Who do you think you are, trying to lecture me in front of everyone?" After Hudson's outburst, I could feel the weight of every eye in the room turning toward us. The once lively and cheerful air had collapsed into something suffocating and cold. And then, my mother's voice cut through the tension, sharp and freezing. "That's enough, Jackson." She stood tall, her gaze so distant and unfamiliar, making me feel like I had never belonged here in the first place. After a few long seconds of heavy silence, she continued, her words firm, each syllable like a nail being driven into my chest. "Jackson, don't forget, you're just a guest here. Don't overstep." Her words hit harder than any winter I had ever endured in Denver. I stood there, frozen for a few seconds, letting the emptiness quietly fill me up from the inside out. Then in a calm, steady voice, I replied, each word heavy as stone, "If you only see me as a guest, then from now on, I'll treat this family like just another place I'm passing through." Right after I said that, Mom looked like she wanted to say something more, but in the end, she chose silence. And then, under the stunned gaze of everyone around me, I started acting exactly like a guest. I strode straight over to where Olivia was standing, calmly reaching out and taking the wireless microphone from her hand, leaving the whole room in silent disbelief. After that, I walked to the corner of the room, where a Bluetooth speaker was sitting, the same one Mom had borrowed from me 2 years ago, to host a small gathering with her friends. It had stayed here ever since, treated like a permanent loan nobody ever bothered to mention again. I unplugged the cables, picked up the speaker, and slowly let my eyes sweep across the room. My gaze fell on a series of familiar items: the portable music player, the decorative garden lights, the spare microphone set, all things I had once brought here. Back when I believed that in a family, you didn't need to keep track of who and what. One by one, I gathered my things with deliberate, steady movements. Just as I was collecting the third item, and Carol's voice called out from behind me, full of good intentions but laced with awkwardness, "Jackson, come on, sweetheart. This is your mother's special day. Don't do this." I stopped, turned to face her and said, as calmly as if I were explaining something painfully simple, "And Carol, you're a guest. When you came here today, did you bring anything that you expected to get back later?" The question hung lightly in the air, but froze the entire room. Aunt Carol faltered, her mouth opening slightly as if to respond. But in the end, she lowered her eyes in silence. In that heavy moment, I continued, my voice steady and emotional, says, "If you didn't lend anything, then there's nothing for you to take back. And me, I'm just a guest too." After that, the room fell into an even more profound silence. Only the sound of my footsteps remained, along with the soft rustle of the familiar things I packed up, one by one, carrying them out to my car. From a party once filled with laughter, the entire place turned into a muted, lifeless painting in just a few moments. And at the center of it, there was only me, the final guest, quietly gathering what was mine, and walking away from the place I once called home. 20 minutes later, my belongings had been neatly packed and loaded onto the pickup truck bed. As I approached the car, Luke ran after me, his face full of worry. He stood in front of the vehicle, reaching out his hand as if trying to stop me, his voice low and urgent. "Jackson, calm down. Today's an important day for your mom. Don't let your anger ruin everything." I stood still momentarily, listening to his sincere advice. Luke, the only one in that house who still genuinely cared about me. I let out a long breath, looked him straight in the eye, My voice deep and firm. I've been trying for 18 years. Luke, my door is always open for you. Come by any time. After saying that, I gave him a light pat on the shoulder. A silent thank you for that rare bit of kindness. At least among all the broken pieces of what used to be called a family, there was still something that kept me from feeling completely bitter. Just as I was about to start the truck and leave, a thought flashed through my mind. I remembered there was still one thing I needed to settle today. Without hesitation, I opened the door, stepped down, and walked back toward the house. Everyone had gathered at the front door, watching my every step. When they saw me coming back, Hudson immediately shouted, his voice echoing across the yard. Changed your mind. Hudson, there's no place for you here anymore. I stopped, looked him calmly in the eye. My voice deep and sharp, like a knife slicing through the air. I just came back to tell you one thing. In 3 months, the lease on this house will expire, and the rent will go up from $1,000 to $2,500 a month. You'd better get ready. Either stay and pay or move out. As soon as I finished, Hudson burst out laughing, his voice dripping with sarcasm. A broke kid like you talking about renting houses. Don't try to fool me. I just gave a faint, cold smile, and calmly replied without a flicker of emotion. Suit yourself. You'll get the official notice from the management company tomorrow. Just wait. Without waiting for a response, I turned and returned to my truck. Within seconds, the engine roared to life, and I drove away, leaving behind the ones who still hadn't realized, who held the power now. After more than an hour of driving, I finally returned to my small house, a quiet space, far away from all the forced laughter and fake smiles I had just left behind. I headed straight into the kitchen and made a cup of black coffee, not because I craved the coffee, but to keep myself awake, to keep my thoughts from spiraling further. As the steam rose from the cup, old memories began to flood back, soft but razor sharp. I remembered the days when I was a little kid, living in the warm embrace of my parents. Dad would take me to the park to kick a soccer ball in the afternoons. Mom would sit by my bed the night and tell me fairy tales. I used to think I would grow up, forever wrapped in that happiness. But then life turned ups, down. I was 12 years old that year. One day, after feeling unusually tired, Dad went to the doctor. The diagnosis came back: late-stage liver cancer. And just 4 months later, he was gone. Quietly, just like the way he had lived his whole life. But before he left this world, Dad had prepared one final gift for me. I remembered that afternoon in the hospital so clearly when Mom and I sat by his bedside. Dad motioned for Mom to hold my hand together with his. Then, in a slow, deep voice, he said, I've set up a trust fund for you. $90,000. The money your grandfather left behind. It's already in your name. When you turn 18, your mother will hand it over to you. He paused, his breathing catching for a moment, then continued, his eyes never leaving mine. Don't waste it. Don't let momentary temptations steal your future. Use it to build a good life you can be proud of. Law. At that moment, my mother nodded, tears filling her eyes. As for me, all I could do was squeeze Dad's hand tightly, not fully grasping the weight of his words yet. Then, as the sunset fell outside the hospital window, Dad squeezed my hand again. His voice was so weak by then, but every word stayed etched in my mind to this day. Grow up to be a good man, and take care of your mother for me. Those were the last words he ever spoke. And maybe, for the rest of my life, I'll never forget that handshake. That tied my promise to everything I would become. After Dad passed away, I started taking care of Mom in his place. Even though I was still just a kid, I always believed that if I tried hard enough, we could lean on each other and make it through the rest of our lives. I truly believed that. Until one late autumn day, 2 years after that fateful moment. That day, I came home from school like usual. When I entered the yard, I saw something unfamiliar. Mom sitting on the front steps to a strange man, and a little girl who looked about 6 years younger than me. Seeing the confusion in my eyes, Mom stood up and waved me over. She smiled and gently said, "This is Hudson, and this is Olivia, his daughter." At that moment, something inside me froze. I hadn't yet processed what her words meant. When she continued, trying to sound as natural as she could, "I'm getting remarried. Soon we'll be a new family." I didn't say anything after that, but her words echoed in my mind for days, like a foreign sound I couldn't get used to. From that day on, I started to understand. Mom's love for me was no longer whole. It's not that she stopped loving me, but clearly, that love now had to be shared with the new people who had entered her life. The house that used to be just ours suddenly felt crowded. There were new laughs around the dinner table, and long silences that only I noticed. And then, 2 years later, we moved, renting a bigger house, the same house, where Mom and Hudson still live to this day. But the thing is, no matter how big the new house was, the distance between me and Mom, from that moment on, could never be closed again. Life after that wasn't as easy as Mom once promised. I tried to accept Hudson as part of our new family and treat Olivia like my real sister. But the older I got, the more I realized there are some gaps you can't bridge with one-sided effort. Hudson always acted like the perfect stepfather whenever Mom was around, but his eyes were never warm whenever it was just us. They were cold and calculating, like my existence was an obstacle to his plans. But I didn't let it get to me. I focused on my studies, on my promise to Dad, to become a good man and take care of Mom for him. But little by little, the schemes hidden behind those handshakes and forced smiles started to show, especially as the $90,000 Dad left for me got closer to being within my reach. When I turned 18, right after receiving the notice that I now had full access to the trust fund, Hudson made his move. That day, he sat across from me in the living room, his face calm but his eyes betraying his ambition. His voice was low, like he was trying to have a family discussion. "Jackson, I think that money should be split. Olivia is your sister. Two in a family we share, right?" After hearing that, I looked him straight in the eye, with not a shred of hope left for any sincerity, and replied, my voice steady but I scold, "That money was a gift from my father to me. You didn't contribute it, you have no claim to it." The room immediately froze after my response. Hudson didn't say another word. He just sat there, his face darkening, then got up and walked away. From that moment on, his attitude toward me changed clearly and openly. A few days later, after receiving my college acceptance letter and an invitation to live in the dorms, I decided, without hesitation, I packed my things and left that house the next morning. The days that followed marked the true beginning of my independent life. The moment I set foot in college, I realized from here on out, I could only rely on myself. I had to figure out tuition, housing, living expenses, every single penny on my own. Luckily, thanks to the trust fund Dad had left me, I could cover my tuition and the most basic costs. I probably wouldn't have made it through the university gates in those early days without that money. During that time, Mom didn't help. She said the family now had other expenses to take care of. I didn't blame her, compared to the years that came later. At least back then, she still remembered to call me once or twice a month. She still worried when I told her I was sick, even if it was only through short text messages. Maybe deep down she still loved me. Her love now had to be divided among so many others. That what was left for me was small and thin. And in those days after I left that house, I threw myself into my studies, picking up any part-time job I could find. Kitchen helper, waiter, library assistant, tutor, classes by day, work by night. No lively spring breaks, no late-night hangouts with friends like other college kids. I only knew one thing. If I didn't push myself forward, no one was left behind to catch me when I fell. Throughout 4 years of college, I lived like a shadow, silent, resilient, reminding myself every single day, don't forget Dad's words. Don't forget the path you chose. And I kept that promise, even though, sometimes, lying awake through long, cold nights, in my tiny dorm room, I couldn't help but wonder, was there still a place for me in some small corner of my mother's heart? Or had she, like the old house we once lived in, become just another place I once passed through? only to leave behind forever, ever. 4 years of college passed by quietly. I was lucky to land a good job right after graduation, thanks to relentless effort. It wasn't the dream job everyone talks about, but for me, it was my very first achievement, earned by my own hands, with no help, borrowing, or relying on anyone. The moment I received my first paycheck, the first thing I did wasn't buy anything for myself. At that moment, the only thing in my mind was my mother's image, and I wired her $500 as a way to show my gratitude. I thought I was doing the right thing. I thought she would be proud. She would be touched that the little boy she once raised had grown up and was now thinking of her. But the only response I got was a cold voice over the phone. "All right, I got it." No words of encouragement, no questions, no warmth. That was it. It was colder than the winter wind blowing outside my window. From that day on, I stopped sending money to mom as a routine. I would send it only when she called, asking for help. Sometimes a few $100s, sometimes 1,000, depending on what she needed. I never resented giving that money, because deep down, if she were still the mother I remembered, the one who held me through my nightmares, who waited for me in the rain at the school gates, if she had stayed that person, if she still loved me like she used to, if she had never taken another path, I would have spent my entire life ensuring she never lacked a thing. But sadly, life doesn't leave room for if only anymore. Time passed year after year. Through relentless effort, I slowly saved up a decent amount for myself. I bought a house, bought a car, and started to enjoy a life I once only dared to dream about. But there was one thing I always kept hidden: my success. I never bragged to mom or mentioned it to Hudson or anyone else during those occasional family gatherings at Christmas or Easter. I would sit quietly through those dinners, listening to them talk about work, about everyone's achievements, letting them assume I was just another guy scraping by. Maybe that's why, in their eyes, I was never someone to be proud of nor hell. Then 2 years ago, an unexpected opportunity came along. While scrolling through a real estate group, I came across a listing. The house Mom and Hudson were renting was being put up for sale. Without a second thought, I reached out to the agent. I arranged to buy the house, but under the condition that my identity would remain anonymous. And I didn't stop there. After the purchase, I had the rent reduced from $1,500 to $1,000 a month, hoping to ease Mom's financial burden a little. That was my way of fulfilling Dad's words. Take care of your mother for me. I did it all quietly. That was enough for me as long as Mom lived well and was happy. But now, looking back at everything, after all those years of silent effort and carrying the role Dad had entrusted to me, what I received in return was a cold sentence at a birthday party. "Jackson, don't forget, you're just a guest here. Don't overstep." And at that moment, I realized, in Mom's heart, I had become nothing more than a guest, lost inside the house that once carried my name. As I sat there, lost in the heavy tide of memories, the sound of my phone alarm suddenly broke the silence, reminding me it was time for bed. I stared at the screen for a long moment, then quietly got up and cleared away the cold coffee cup on the table. Each step weighed a ton, but I walked toward my room out of old habit, even though my heart was still tangled with thoughts that refused to settle. The next morning, during my lunch break, I followed through with what I had been thinking about all night. I called the real estate agency, the one managing the house where Mom and Hudson were living. My voice was steady and low as I spoke to the representative. "I'd like to adjust the rental agreement. Once the current lease expires, the new rent will be $2,500 a month." The representative confirmed my request and then asked, "When would you like us to notify the tenants?" I answered without hesitation, "Today. According to the terms, I can give 3 months' notice." Everything was processed quickly. Less than 15 minutes and it was all set. When the call ended, I sat there, taking a deep breath. It wasn't out of satisfaction. It wasn't about revenge. It was because I had drawn a clear line for the first time in many years, instead of clinging to a hope that had long stopped existing. And deep inside, there was a strange sense of relief. Not happiness, but a kind of peace, like someone who had finally accepted the truth. That night, just as I had expected, Mom called me, only she called sooner than I thought she would. The moment I picked up, her voice came through the line, trying to stay light. I'm sorry for how I acted yesterday. I didn't want to rehash any of it. I got straight to the point. My voice even uncalm. You're calling about the rent, aren't you? The other end of the line went completely silent. After a moment, Mom's voice came back, softer this time. Could you reconsider lowering the rent for us? Your dad and I can't afford $2,500. The moment I heard her say, your dad, I cut her off, my voice dropping low. Don't ask me to call him that. My dad's been dead for a long time. Before she could say anything else, I kept going, each word sharp as a blade. Just yesterday, he stood at the front door and called me a broke kid who couldn't possibly own a house. Right after I said that, Mom quickly jumped in. Her voice rushed. Don't hold that against him. He didn't mean it. I let out a cold, dry laugh, then spoke slowly, each word heavy. You'd rather take his side than stand by the son you brought into this world. After that silence, a long, heavy silence that weighed more than any explanation ever could, I didn't hang up. I just sat there, phone in hand, waiting to see if Mom had anything left to say. Or maybe that silence was already the answer. And then, almost a full minute later, just when I thought the call would end in silence, Mom finally spoke. Her voice trembled slightly like she was trying to hold something back. Do you remember what your father told you before he passed? He entrusted me to you. And yet, she hadn't even finished her sentence when I coldly cut her off. You have no right to bring that up. I gripped the phone tighter, my voice steady, but inside, a storm was raging. You chose to remarry. You were the one who cut the thread Dad left behind. I paused for a beat, then continued, pressing every word. And don't forget, yesterday you told me, I'm just a guest. And guests, they don't have family here. Right after saying that, I didn't wait for her response. I hung up, without hesitation. I opened my contacts, scrolled down to her name, and blocked her number. It was a quick, decisive move, like I was finally closing a door left open too many times, only to let in nothing but hurt. In the small room, the only sound left was the steady hum of the air conditioner. I sat there for a long time. No anger, no pain, only a chilling hollow emptiness. In the following days, I completely cut off all contact with the family. Hudson and Olivia tried calling me several times. Every time my phone rang, I would just quietly stare at the screen, then either hit decline or let it ring until it stopped. I didn't block them. I wanted them to feel that helpless frustration of negotiating with someone who refused to listen. 3 months passed, just as I expected. They officially moved out of the house, unable to afford the new rent of $2,500. They had no choice but to leave. I stood at a distance the day they moved out, watching the house slowly empty. There was a little sadness inside me. After all, that place once held memories was home, but I knew clearly that I couldn't let myself soften. I couldn't let the people who had once belittled and used me trample on my kindness again. A month later, a new family rented the house. I adjusted the rent back to $1,500, a fair market price with no need to cheapen it out of misplaced sympathy. On the day I signed the new lease, I received a text from Hudson's number. The message was short, but every word carried heavy blame. This is your mother. You agreed to rent it out to someone else for $1,500. Well, you raised it to $2,500. For your family, I'm truly disappointed in you. I sat there looking at the message for a long while. I knew Hudson wasn't the one who sent it. It was Mom. She must have used his phone because her number had long been blocked. After a few minutes of silence, I typed out a reply, my words cold as ice. Sorry. Who are you trying to reach? Maybe you have the wrong number. I'm just a guest in that house. Remember? As soon as I hit send, I immediately blocked Hudson's number. And just a few minutes later, I blocked Olivia's, too sometimes. During those long, quiet nights, I still sit alone, thinking about my promise to my father before he left. I wonder, have I truly fulfilled that promise? A sadness creeps in, realizing I couldn't keep everything he entrusted to me. Not wholly, But deep down, I believe Dad would understand. He would understand that some promises can't be fulfilled no matter how much we want to keep them. Mainly when the people we were trying to protect chose to walk away long ago. And before I end this story, I want to ask all of you, the dear listeners who have stayed with me until the very last moment, was I wrong to take back the house that was rightfully mine? Was I wrong for not being able to carry out my father's wish fully? Please share your thoughts in the comments below. I genuinely want to hear what you think. And if you feel even a small part of the story resonates with you, please don't forget to subscribe, hit like, and share the story with others. Thank you for listening.